the audience is still exiting the theater and standing outside. And I'm being carried out going, like I was struggling to breathe. And so they got me in the car and took me to the hospital. And she took me to the hospital.
You are just giving new meaning to the phrase, the show must go on. My goodness. This episode was brought to you by Alloy Health and Rivian. Welcome to the Second Opinion, Tig. You know, believe it or not, you and I have a lot in common. And I must admit, I was a little bit suspect when my producer said, oh yeah, we're going to do a health show with Tig Notaro. And I'm like, wait a minute, she's a comedian, right? Yeah, but let me tell you, you and I both have Gulf Coast roots. I'm from Mobile, Alabama.
Oh, amazing.
And you're from Pass Christian. You were born in Pass Christian? No, or in New Orleans?
No, I was born in Jackson, and then we moved down to Pass Christian when I was like, I think, 6 months old.
Okay. So, you know that there's a lot of regional rivalry going on there. So just FYI.
Thanks for the heads up.
In addition to everything else, you and I are really part of that club that nobody wants to be a part of. And that's the Motherless Daughters Club, you know?
Yeah. I think I've come around to the idea that maybe my mother knows on some level about my kids, and I can connect with her memory really well through my relationship and love with my children. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's never a point in the time that you don't feel connected. My mother's always with me, even though she's been physically gone for quite a long time. But I did a little deep dive on you, and I also realized that, you know, you had a pretty intense 4-month period right around the time of your cancer diagnosis. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in that 4 months?
Yeah, it was 2012. And I had bronchitis and a sinus infection that turned into pneumonia. I went to urgent care. I got antibiotics, and that I had an adverse response to the medication. And I developed C. diff, which is the bacterial disease, intestinal disease that is quite deadly, or can be. And then, my mother tripped and hit her head and died. And then my girlfriend and I split up. And then I was diagnosed with invasive bilateral breast cancer. So it was,
that's a lot.
It was a tough run. It was really tough.
Well, you know, I just want to clarify for our audience who doesn't really know what C. diff is. It's really not uncommon in young people, because you were only like, 40, 41?
Yeah.
How old were you?
Yeah. Somewhere around there. But I remember the doctor saying that, you know, he said, I don't know what's going on. And then after he said, we're going to test you for C. diff. And he said, let's hope it's not that, but we'll just test you. And then he came in and said, you do have it. And he said he was shocked, because he said it's most times really young people and the elderly or very sickly people.
Right.
And he said, and you don't seem to be any of those. And meanwhile, they didn't know I was lying there with invasive cancer.
It's a very uncommon complication of people who get really strong antibiotics. And, you know, we have a lot of bacteria, good bacteria that live in our bowel. You have bacteria, you have viruses, you have fungi. They help with all kinds of things, with digestions and hormone regulation. And when you take a lot of antibiotics, it just knocks out all the good bacteria that protect you from everything else. Well, I'm glad they figured it out, and glad you're here. Only to find out how long between that and finding out that you had the breast cancer.
C. diff was the end of March. Maybe it was end of July. Oh, July 25th, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
And you're just getting over your C. diff.
I was still going. It was tough. It was like I was released from the hospital, and I was given medication, that's also antibiotic, but I guess it wasn't anything that would. It wasn't the same kind of antibiotic.
Right.
But
It's the antibiotic to kill the C. diff.
Yeah.
So you can get the other stuff back.
I heard that's really fascinating on hand sanitizer when it says 99.9% of all germs and bacteria killed. That's the one that it can't kill is C. diff. It's a really hard thing to get a hold of. But yeah, it took me a while. I had horrible pain and horrible trouble eating for a long time until I actually went to a nutritionist who prescribed this concoction that turned my gut around in a way that the medicine wasn't. It was really interesting. It all like really, really cleared up for me. And I continued with the medicine, but I also I was so desperate. I was losing so much weight and in so much pain.
Yeah. And that's the problem. You kill the C. diff. Now what's in there? So you have to repopulate your gut with the good bacteria. But all right, so you get diagnosed with breast cancer. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, had you had a mammogram? Because you're 41, you're just around the age where you should, we say, screening mammogram at 40. So had you had one?
No. I had not. That was my first. I went in.
Did you feel a lump yourself, or how did you decide? Okay, now's a good time for a mammogram.
Well, I don't know if this is too much information, but my girlfriend was like, "You have a lump on your breast," and I tell everybody, I don't know who I was in 2012 or before. I mean, I don't recognize myself when I talk about what I was doing or thinking or how I was responding to things. I thought I don't have cancer. Like I was really that person with the mentality of like, that's other people. Of course, I don't have cancer. And I was teasing my girlfriend. Like I would hold my chest and jokingly be like, "Oh, help, I have cancer." Like, just being so stupid. And she was like, "Tig, you need to go to the doctor." And then, we broke up. And soon after I went to the doctor, and to this day, it took me a long time to interact with her without being so emotional and thankful. I mean, I feel like she really saved my life.
I mean, when I tell you the series of things that doesn't happen to, one, that a young person who's otherwise healthy gets C. diff, then you get, invasive breast cancer. And then and your mother, people fall all the time. People don't fall and hit their heads and die. That's a pretty uncommon thing to happen as well. So with all of this going on, so you get diagnosed and it's days before you've got a stand-up planned.
Yeah.
Now, a normal person, I'm not that I'm calling you abnormal. I'm not.
I am. I totally embrace it. I'm an abnormal person.
How did you not just go home and curl up in a ball? But you went on stage and performed. What was going through your mind then?
Trust me, I went home and I was in a ball and I was so emotional. I couldn't believe, because that was the final straw was my diagnosis. And I was stunned because I really believed that the universe or whoever's in charge couldn't possibly give me more to handle. And so I just was not expecting it. And so, when I got that diagnosis, I was in a ball of emotion on my bed and couch. And then I had this upcoming show in Los Angeles at my home club, this venue called Largo. And I called the owner and just said, "Hey," and he knew everything I'd been going through. And I said, "I just got diagnosed with cancer. And so I can't do my show." And he said, he was, of course, very compassionate, but he also said, let's not cancel the show. Let's just keep it on the books, and who knows, maybe you'll want to do a show. And he said, even if you're backstage and 1 second before you go on, if you decide you don't want to do it, we can cancel it, but let's just leave it open. And I thought he was nuts. I was just like, man, he is not taking in what I'm saying. I'm in a rough spot.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, as the next few days unfolded, I found myself thinking, I have a lot to talk about. And I don't know if it's funny, but I was maniacally laughing in my head and to myself in my apartment, thinking of all of this material and these feelings and ideas that I had. And so I just thought, I had also seen how quickly health and life can go away. Mm-hmm. My own experience with my health and my mother dying. And I thought, I want to do stand-up another time. I don't know what's in my future, if I have a future. So I thought I would just take that chance and get on stage.
You know, I'm not going to ruin your joke for you, but I listened to the routine and you were saying you've just recovered from your C. diff and you've mm-hmm. lost like 25 or 30 pounds mm-hmm. and you go in for your mammogram. And can you tell us what the mammogram tech said to you?
Yeah. I think this is what you're talking about. She said, oh my gosh, you have such a flat stomach. What is it? So, she said something like, yeah. What's your secret? Or what do you do? Or what do you do? What's your secret? And I was like, oh, I'm dying. Is that what I said?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, so when you go in or you get the mammogram, they call mm-hmm. you back. Now, you had cancer in both breasts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, that is, again, very, very, very unusual. Do you know that like for women who are 40 years old, the incidence of breast cancer is probably in 1.5%? I mean, it's very low. Most women are much older when they're diagnosed with breast mm-hmm. cancer. But then on top of that, to have bilateral breast cancer.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get a little nerdy. So I just want you to be aware of this. Now, what stage was your breast cancer in both breasts?
The stage was only stage 2. Okay. But my doctors felt like, but there was a lot of, like I had cancer in my nipples and mm-hmm. in my breasts. And, so she really felt like having a double mastectomy would be best because mm-hmm. they didn't realize, like, once they went in and saw, they didn't realize that there was so much also in my nipples. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay. So the bilateral mastectomy totally makes sense. Did you do chemo afterwards?
No. They felt like, it potentially could have been a good idea just to be extra cautious and careful. Mm-hmm. But because I was still struggling so much with C. diff, mm-hmm. I could barely walk across a room.
So were you offered anything else as far as therapy after other than chemo? Tamoxifen?
Yeah, I did tamoxifen for maybe 6 years, but I had a lot of complications from that. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of cysts, mm-hmm. and I had a lot of cysts burst, mm-hmm. and I ended up hospitalized one time in a very serious way. They think one burst on a blood vessel, mm-hmm. And I was having trouble breathing. My doctor said my insides, had like a pitcher's worth of blood just loose in my body. And it happened right when I got off stage I think I was in Philadelphia. And mm-hmm. truly the show ended and I collapsed after. I didn't know what was happening. And I got carried out the front door by security and my wife pulled the car around. She happened to be on tour with me. She pulled the rental car around and they said, it'll be faster than calling 911 because the hospital is 2 blocks away. So they carry me. The audience is still exiting the theater and standing outside. And I'm being carried out going, like I was struggling to breathe. And so they got me in the car and took me to the hospital. And she took me to the hospital.
You are just giving new meaning to the phrase, the show must go on. My goodness.
It was wild. And then when I was in the hospital, they told me, they said, you had a cyst that burst and your body will just absorb the blood. And I was like, okay. And again, I could barely breathe and I was struggling. And I had, been through plenty of health emergencies already and hospitalization. So I've dealt with a lot of pain. I didn't understand how the general population of women who probably hadn't been through as much, medical emergencies that I had recently gone through, that they just dealt with this pain. And so they said, you could do an elective surgery and have the blood removed. And, if you can't deal with this. And so I was like, I said, I think I'm going to have to, because I was struggling so horrifically. And so they did. And they told my wife, they said, it's probably just going to be a 45-minute surgery. She said, over 3 hours go by. The surgeon comes out and said she was still hemorrhaging. They were about to send me home. And of course, I didn't end up having to pay for that surgery. But anyway, it was really hard to deal with. I personally struggled with tamoxifen, but I went as long as I could. And my oncologist said, we have to weigh the,
Yeah, there's quality of life involved in taking these medications. But getting back to you being in the hospital, not being able to breathe, being in that much pain, and someone says, "Oh, it'll just reabsorb." That is part of my, when I say part of my ministry, because women frequently we're not believed. When you're complaining of something, and then when you do, they think you're exaggerating. Oh, you'll be fine. And it's a matter of really having to advocate for yourself. Really, in this late day and time, we still have to say, no. I mean, the consequences would have been completely dire.
I would have gone back to my hotel and bled to death. I mean, no doubt would have gone back to my hotel and bled to death.
As a gynecologist, I don't really understand how someone would look at you and go, oh, yeah, if you've got that much blood in your belly, I think it's incumbent upon us to figure out, well, where did it come from? And again, even if it did reabsorb, it would take a long time. And it's quite irritating.
To be bleeding internally. Oh my God. It's like you're on fire inside. And I don't know why it makes it hard to breathe. But I was really struggling to breathe.
Well, because you've got pain receptors all throughout your abdominal cavity. They're not as one-to-one as like the pain receptors in your finger where you know exactly what it is. Yeah. But imagine you've got a sort of a caustic irritant throughout your entire abdominal cavity. So it's all lighting up now. And then you guard. That's what happens. And then you're trying desperately not to breathe, and so you're trying to not move that diaphragm because every time you do, it hurts. So
it was tough.
Oh yeah.
And that's when the surgeon came out, that's who said there was about a pitcher's worth of blood in there. It wasn't before, it was after the surgery.
Oh my God.
So.
Well, I want to explain. I forget because I talk about things and you and I understand, but for our listeners that don't even know what tamoxifen is or why it's used, but after breast cancer, after you've had whatever surgery, be it a lumpectomy or mastectomy, you have receptors. You have estrogen receptors and progesterone receptors that are tested on your cancer. And obviously you had an estrogen receptor positive cancer. And so the tamoxifen is just the medication, a drug that you use is really an anti-estrogen. And that's why it is hoping that it will, again, not stimulate if there are any residual cancer cells there. It's going to do the estrogen blocking.
Yeah.
But for a young woman who is still menstruating, and obviously your ovaries were still doing things at that point, it does have a lot of other side effects. And obviously cysts, one of them. Were you still getting your periods at that time?
It was kind of spotty and then disappeared. And then when my oncologist took me off of tamoxifen, it kind of reappeared briefly and then went away.
Oh, lucky you, because look, it continues. You go right from that to perimenopause or menopause.
Yes.
Did anyone talk to you about what does that even mean for menopause after cancer?
Oh my God. No.
Oh, we have so much work to do.
I know. It's, I did get incredible care. And I, as far as I know, am healthy, but it really does. It almost takes having a medical degree to get a diagnosis like that. And I was so lucky, even though my mother was gone and my girlfriend, I have such incredible friends and family members, and my very close friend, Beth, who I've known my whole life, came to every doctor appointment and with her legal pad and took notes and helped me navigate the whole process. But man, if I didn't have that, I would have even less information.
Exactly. And I think that, doctors, we get a little, laser focused on the thing that we are working on.
Yeah.
And not really thinking about the bigger picture. It's like, there's breast cancer, but there's everything else that's going on in your life, in your body. And those things are going to continue in the background. And if someone's not really at least taking those into consideration, then, you do sort of leave with, I would say, less than optimal care of everything. This episode of The Second Opinion with Dr. Sharon is brought to you by Alloy Health. As an OBGYN for over 30 years, my entire career has been not just about treating women, but about educating them as well. My goal has always been to give women information so that they can feel empowered enough to advocate for themselves. As the Chief Medical Advisor at Alloy Health, I am continuing this mission. I lead the medical team, guide clinical strategy, and ensure that every treatment plan is rooted in science, not trends or misinformation. At Alloy Health, my job is to make sure that women get access to evidence-based perimenopause and menopause-centered care. Changes in our skin as we age are natural. But did you know that in the first 5 years after menopause, you could lose as much as 30% of your dermal collagen? And that this accelerated skin aging is thought to be due to estrogen loss? Skin is our largest organ, and it is chock full of estrogen receptors. So that's why we at Alloy Health created M4, our skincare line made with estriol, an effective topical estrogen formulated specifically for skin. These are our 3 prescription-based options: our original M4 face cream, M4 face serum, and M4 eye cream. I personally love the M4 eye cream, which is one of our newest additions. When people tell me my skin looks great, I tell them, hey, it must be the M4. Join the 95% of women who tried Alloy and saw relief in the first 2 weeks. Head to myalloy.com and tell them all about your symptoms, and you'll get a fully customized treatment plan. And you'll get $25 off your first order today when you use code TSO25. Head to myalloy.com and enter code TSO25 to get $25 off your first order. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Rivian and their all-electric, full-size SUVs and trucks made for all of life's adventures. Rivian just announced their all-new Rivian Quad, their fastest, most capable vehicle yet. Powered by 4 motors, one for each wheel, it gives you unmatched traction, control, and performance anywhere you are. On winding roads or off-road trails, the Quad is engineered for precision driving and maximum adventure. With a native NACS port, the Quad is compatible with 50,000 DC fast chargers, so getting back on the road is hassle-free. With beautifully designed interiors, tons of storage, and incredible capability inside and out, the Quad is made for everyday comfort and rugged utility. Plus, you'll love the tech. The Rivian experience gets better over time with software updates. The premium audio experience sounds as good as the ride feels. Premium audio is part of the Sound Plus Vision package in Quad and Tri vehicles and can be a paid upgrade in dual models. And the Rivian Autonomy Platform Plus, a paid subscription product, offers a full suite of advanced safety and driver assistance features. There is adaptive cruise control, active lane keeping, blind spot monitoring, and forward collision warning with automatic emergency braking. Check out the all-new, all-electric quad truck or SUV and the full lineup of vehicles now at Rivian.com. As a physician and a mother who treasures time with family and friends, I know how important it is to slow down and make room for the moments that really matter. One of my favorite memories is a trip I took with good girlfriends to connect on where we were in our lives. So instead of booking separate hotel rooms, we found a beautiful Airbnb home where we could stay all under one roof. We cooked together, laughed together, and shared our stories. Maintaining our relationships is how we have kept close and grown our friendship circle over the decades. Those moments of closeness are what makes travel so meaningful. Airbnb makes it possible to choose a place that truly fits the occasion, whether that's a cozy apartment for a quick getaway or a spacious home for family celebrations. And while my family has been guests, we've also experienced the other side of Airbnb as hosts. It's been wonderful to see how opening your home can bring joy to others and help make travel more personal. Hosting is not only a way to share your space, but also a way to discover the value in it. You may be surprised what your home could be worth while you're away. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. You know, it's great that we're having this conversation today because it is Menopause Awareness Month and it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So look, we got a 2-for-1 here.
Yeah.
But let me ask you. All right, so we get to this. So now you've gotten through. Tell me, when do you have twins, right?
I do. Yes.
Okay, so all right, so in the midst of all of this other chaos is going on. So old girlfriend is gone. Now you've got a new wife, and then you're thinking about kids. How'd you get these twins?
When we first got together, I was secretly trying to harvest my eggs to try and get a surrogate to carry. And I had looked into also adoption. All this I was doing on the side in the beginning of our relationship because I didn't want to scare her off. She's 15 years younger than me. So I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be this old person trying to have kids in the 11th hour of life and scare her away right when we're beginning to date. And so, and I want to say, a lot of people will say, you should adopt, which of course I'm very supportive of, but by the way, it's not that simple. You know, I don't look great on paper, especially in that moment. I'm like, you know, have so many medical issues. I'm a comedian. I'm a high school dropout. I'm not a religious person. I'm gay. Like, people aren't like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to give my child to this person. So, you know, I think people think you just decide, oh, I'm going to adopt, and you go get a kid. And, but anyway, so in the process of trying to look at adoption and have a surrogate for my own eggs, somehow Stephanie finds out that I'm doing this. And because in my head, I thought somebody could carry my child and then we could move forward with our relationship and we could get further down the road. This is where I'm telling you.
Oh, by the way, I have some extra eggs over here,
And by the way, I have a child coming in 2 weeks. But anyway, she finds out and she said, oh my gosh, she said, I don't want you doing this alone. She said, I've always wanted to have kids. And so I would love to be a part of this process with you. And I was so floored. I couldn't believe who came into my life at this point. And so, yeah, we just, we used a sperm donor and, Stephanie's eggs and, a surrogate.
How far were you out from your breast cancer when you decided to, okay, I'm going to harvest eggs with IVF? How many years from that?
I wasn't years away. And it was listen, I was in a tough, confusing spot in life. I felt like I had lost everything. And it all happened at a time when in my mind, I was going to have kids right when I got this diagnosis. Mm. And so it was my last ditch effort. And here I had been told they had gotten the cancer, that they felt good. And it was definitely something my oncologist did not want me to do, with, fear that the injections would trigger the cancer, of recurrence. And this is where I can't make an argument for myself or my decisions other than I was a desperate person, and I went against my doctor's opinion, and I tried.
Well, the doctor's duty is to inform. They're not to prohibit or, tell you what you can and cannot do as a grown woman. But it is you see and I both see that that's a little antithetical to the treatment that you're about to have. Because even after you've had the surgery, remember we just talked about the tamoxifen, and the tamoxifen is an anti-estrogen.
Well, I tried to have kids first and then went on tamoxifen.
Yeah, right. But I'm just saying, but those are two opposing notions, in that you're trying to have a low estrogen state.
Yes.
And yet you're going to take medications that really shoot your estrogen levels up really, really high.
Yeah.
And in the wake of breast cancer diagnosis, that's really, it's a risky move. It's a risky move, but it was yours to make, and you did it, and you're still here. So, you win with that.
13 years later.
Yeah. So tell me, what does it feel like? At what point do you feel less like a survivor? I mean, and by that, I mean, how much does breast cancer 13 years ago, is it ever present? Do you ever get to the point where you're like, yeah, I had breast cancer, not I am a breast cancer person?
I mean, I think it's somehow both. I've had, it's like I get down the road and then I have these little scares. And, there's this, we see this thing on your liver, we're monitoring it. They're like, again, those cysts that I was dealing with for years. And then I was working in Toronto a few years ago, and I had a lump that was like an inch from my scar, but it ended up being benign. And so it's like I get down the road and I feel good and confident, and then I trip up on, even like, look, I just went to the doctor. I have this, my eye has started drooping, and it was like, oh, this could be your muscle in your eyelid is weak. It could be a stroke. It could be a tumor, And so it's like, it's all kicked back up again,
right? Right.
And so, but I did go to the doctor, and it ended up not being anything more serious than the muscle in my eyelid, and I have to have a surgery on that. But so it's always there, because breast cancer can reappear years later, stage 4, in something like your eye, or brain, or however it gets there, and or wherever it goes. And so it continues. The fear will continue to rear its head when I have these little glitches. But once I get through it, I'm like, I know I don't have full control over what's coming, but what I do have control over, I take very seriously. I take my health, what I eat. I exercise every day. I prioritize my sleep, and I really, really do these things. And I try and remove as much stress from my life as possible. And I take it very, very seriously, because I know what it is like to be in a lot of pain and not be able to turn my health around. And that had never happened to me. You get a headache or a stomach ache, you take the medicine, you get a hold of it, you get back to life. And when you get down a dark, scary road like I did, and you can't turn certain parts of your health around, and you see your body deteriorate, there is nothing more terrifying. And I don't ever want to be there again.
I totally understand that. Do you have, given the fact that you had breast cancer so early and bilateral breast cancer, did you have the genetic screening done?
I did, and I didn't have it.
You didn't have it?
No.
And what about your family history? Anybody in your family have breast cancer?
No.
Yeah. Isn't it something? Knowing that you've had the genetic screening doesn't make me feel any better. It's like your family history is still your family history. Whatever it is that we have, maybe you haven't identified that one yet.
Exactly.
So that's why it is so important that we keep up with the screening, and you say modify the things that you can, because there are environmental factors that decrease. So tell me I know you switched, now you're a vegetarian or vegan?
Vegan.
You're vegan.
And my whole family, we're plant-based.
Okay. And what does your day-to-day routine look like?
As far as what?
I mean, just your exercise routine. What do you, do you meditate? Do you?
I do. Every morning I wake up and I meditate for 20 minutes. And then I take my kids to school. And then 2 to 3 days a week, I do strength training, weight training, and I walk every day. I try to swim maybe realistically once or twice a month. It's not a lot. But yeah. And then I go about my day, and like I said, I'm plant-based. So, that's what I'm eating. And I try to lean more in the world of whole food, plant-based. There's what's his name? Dr. Geiger or something. He wrote this book called How Not to Die. And his recommendation of the different foods that you should take, he said, we're not perfect, but if you lean towards these amounts of servings per, grains, beans, cruciferous, berries, all these different things, that is the diet I felt most healthy and good following. And so that's what I do. And then at night, I really follow my sleep routine.
Yeah. So important. So important.
It really is. I was all over the place until I got really serious about this time I wake up and this time I go to bed. And I don't, I'm not looking at my phone in bed before I fall asleep. I'm not doing any of that kind of stuff. I really focus on, and I also do deep breathing before I sleep. And I've taught my children how to do that. And man, they are out like a light after 3 or 4 of these deep breaths and exhales that they do. It really, there's something to it.
That is, I think, the part of our traditional medical training that gets lost in the, by the wayside. Because again, we get so disease focused, but we're not prevention focused. And I think that we have a lot more control over our health and how we age that we don't really take advantage of. And the last thing I'm going to ask you about on your routine, what about alcohol?
I don't drink.
You don't drink? That's the same. All right. And for our listeners, the things that increase your risk of breast cancer, being obese, not exercising, alcohol, drinking 2 or more alcoholic beverages a day increases your risk of breast cancer as much as taking hormone therapy after menopause. So people are so worried about, I can't take hormone therapy. And then they go home and, have 6 drinks. It's not doing yourself any good with that. But I want to get back to menopause. All right. So now you're fully menopausal. What was that menopause transition like? And are you still having symptoms of menopause now?
Yeah, I was very confused. I remember I was working in Toronto and I was having trouble sleeping and I didn't know what was happening to me. I never had trouble sleeping. And I remember telling Stephanie, I said, I feel like I'm starting to have trouble staying in hotel rooms. I'm just not sleeping out here. And then when I got home, I was still struggling. And luckily there's been more of a conversation around these types of symptoms. But I would say that was the first real symptom was my sleep it just went sideways. And then the hot flashes started. I think that was mainly it was hot flashes and my sleep going completely haywire.
Are they gone now?
The hot flashes are because I did start hormone replacement therapy.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. We could go another hour with this. So you decided to do hormone therapy.
Yes, because I was also, I started to also develop, I don't know if it was anxiety.
What'd you say? No, I was going to ask about osteoporosis. That's coming up next. So,
osteoporosis. Yes. Yes. And I had some anxiety, which I had never experienced. I think it's anxiety or panic or I don't know what, but I just was not feeling myself. And I met with a doctor who suggested it and hormone replacement therapy and went into how a lot of people don't realize that women at my age and older really start to become at risk of heart disease and heart failure. And it really increases because of this shift with hormones. And
that is so progressive. I love your doctor, whoever it was that gave you that hormone therapy.
After all of the conversations and research, and I did feel like, wow, I do want to try this. And I'm glad that I have, because even though I really still have to, which I think I would continue to do anyway, but focus on my sleep. That's the thing that gives me the most trouble, is my sleep. But in general, I feel like a completely different person.
How long have you been on? How long have you been on your HRT?
Maybe a year and a half or 2 years, something like that.
Did you have any problems with the brain fog? Because I can imagine in your job, you've got to keep a lot of things in your head while you're up there. You can't be in the middle of a routine and go, where was I going with that?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I think I had brain fog for sure. And I think also just exhaustion from the lack of sleep and all of that. But I feel like a pretty normal functioning person at this point. That my big dream in life would be that I could just knock out for 8 hours, no problem. But every morning I'm a little like, oh, how much, what did I get? 5 hours? Okay. 7 hours? All right. So it fluctuates, but I'm doing, I was going on truly 2 to 3 hours a night.
Oh, not good.
Yeah.
Not good.
I couldn't do it. I could not do it.
Now, because you don't have enough to do with twin boys and a comedy career and everything else you've got going on, but you've got a documentary that's coming out, in January? Is that right?
No, November 14th.
Oh, November. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. Come see me in the good light. Tell me a little bit about what this documentary is all about.
This documentary is about my old pal, Andrea Gibson, non-binary poet with stage 4 ovarian cancer in the mountains of Colorado. And I was talking with our mutual friend, Steph Willen, who said, I feel like Andrea's life would make a really great documentary right now. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my God, yes. Yes. And Andrea was very well known in the poetry world, had published 7 or 8 books and toured the world and bought a house on poetry. And anyway, I had reached out to people in the documentary film space and pitched this idea. And people were a little like, a poet. But 3 days later, I heard back from one of the filmmakers, Ryan White, and his producing partner, Jessica. And they said that, they were going to get on a flight a week later and go out and start filming. They were very compelled after they looked into Andrea and just so moved by the work and the way Andrea dealt with such an intense diagnosis was just mind-blowing. And Ryan said, this is obviously not a sparkly Hollywood pitch or project, so we'll just raise the money independently and hope to make the most beautiful film we can. And we did, and the film ended up winning Sundance, even outside of, not just for documentary films, even scripted films. It cleaned up at so many other film festivals, and Apple TV bought it, and it's really wild. It's really incredible. And very sadly, Andrea passed away in July. And I had the unreal opportunity to be with Andrea in those final days. And it was one of the most devastating and inspiring experiences of my life. I felt like I was on a different planet for a couple of months after witnessing what I did. So many dynamics in that house. Friends, family, Andrea's ex-girlfriends, Andrea's wife, everybody coming together out of pure love for this person. And the movie is, no doubt, you'll feel a lot watching it, but it's also, Andrea was one of the funniest people and somebody that was such a treat to have a deep laugh with. And there's so many funny moments in this film. And I would say the majority of people that walk out of the theater say thank you for making this movie. And they feel an urgency to re-examine life and really get out there and do things differently.
I am so sorry for your loss of your friend. And it's something we don't talk openly about, that we all know that it's going to happen to us one day. We just hope that we have the courage and the eloquence to face it. Most people don't, by the way, because it just haven't been, we haven't given it the thought and care that it needs. And I'm sure that this film, given your experiences, with near death, and this isn't even the first time that you've had to deal with the death of a loved one to be there in those final hours. And do you think that experience brought a different perspective to the film in terms of how you chose to tell her story?
Yeah, I've been at now 4 bedsides, end of life bedsides, and 3 of them were in hospitals, and this was in Andrea's home, Andrea's bed. Andrea wanted to be surrounded by loved ones. Andrea's death is not in the documentary. I don't think that.
Yeah, but the audience knows this is where we are.
Yeah, and I think we finished the movie before Andrea died, and I think there will be an addition. There will be a mention, I think, at the end, obviously, that Andrea did ultimately pass away. But Ryan, the director, he said, we don't feel like we need our hero to die in this film. So we wrapped it up earlier so Andrea could see the movie and so that we could submit it to Sundance. And but I think that more than anything, going into this project, look, I want every project to be a wonderful experience, but I felt extremely protective. And it was so sensitive to go into Andrea and Meg's life. Meg is Andrea's wife at this time. And I just said, look, there can't be a weirdo rattling around in this project. This has to be fully love and care. And it was, because, I have been at the end of life with 3 others, and my mother, my stepfather, and my cousin. And there was I would say more of an openness when Andrea passed away, and it really, really made me understand how you have to stay in conversation with the reality of what's happening. You can remain positive, and it's so helpful to remain positive, but you also have to really meet the moment in a realistic way and start conversations sooner with illness and end of life, because it's hard to accept, and I'm blown away by the bravery at the end of life that I've seen. It's really remarkable. And it's not just the person who's dying, but the people around. It's something.
If you can talk about it, and that's the big if. And a lot of people want to live in happy land and pretend like it's not happening. And it's unfortunate, because you squander a huge opportunity.
Yes.
To be able to say the things that you want to say.
Yes.
Before someone leaves this earth.
Yeah.
And before we go, I just want to say, is there anything else that you would like to leave our audience with before we sign off?
One of my favorite things that I think about and I share with people all the time is, I had heard this saying, and I kind of changed it slightly so it's a little more universal, and it's kind of my North Star in life. And it's, the best gift you can give anyone is a well-lived life of your own. And that is really how I try to live my life. And I try to take care of myself. I try to live a happy, full life, because I don't want anybody worrying about me. I don't want anybody having to drop their life to take care of me because I haven't taken care of myself. And I want to give my kids and my wife and my friends and family that gift, that I'm I'm good. I'm taking care of myself and I'm doing my best. And that makes everyone around me do their best.
Absolutely. Tig, your story is really incredible. And I think that very few people could have not only recovered, but thrived after so many of the things that were thrown at you. So I thank you for being my guest. I hope that you'll come back because I told you, we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Yes, same.
It's time for the last part of the show where I give you my doctor's orders and leave you with takeaways from today's conversation. Number one, 90% of people with stage 1 breast cancer will live a normal lifespan. And even those with later stage cancers can also live a productive and long life. Breast cancer is, in early cases, curable. And most breast cancer survivors will die of heart disease than of their breast cancer. Number two, see your doctor annually for a breast exam and do breast exams yourself and start screening at age 40, whether you think you need to or not. Take any breast lump seriously, regardless of the mammogram findings. Sonograms, MRIs, or biopsies may be necessary depending upon your individual risk factors and family history. And most importantly, number three, don't let the fear of breast cancer get in the way of regular screening and checkups. For more information on this episode, check out our show notes. Join us each week wherever you find your podcasts as I break down medical topics and leave you with expert advice. If you enjoyed the show, follow us so you never miss an episode. If you like what you hear, leave a review. You can submit your questions at drsharonmalone.com and click on the second opinion. Until next week, take care.